welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Chaim Checkmate Coffman. Welcome back. How are you, my friend? So last week we stirred up some waters regarding not just the Karaites. It's really more with anybody who doesn't accept the oral law. And one thing that through following chat that I had encountered was that whenever and I mentioned this to you earlier during our call, but one thing I've mentioned in the live chat was, so you only believe in Tanakh, nothing oral at all, so my question was, so what foreskin did they circumcise? Because it was the Hebrew word, I think is orlah. There's 4 or 5 different definitions. One's like the earlobe, one's like the weenus on the elbow. There's like 4 or 5 different things, and he came back with this really super, I think it was like 2 or 3 paragraphs of information, and I just kind of scanned through it, but I realized he was quoting a bunch of other people and other things. So my response to that was, so you have your own oral law and you reject the Talmud. Interesting. That was kind of how I left that alone. And so anyway, that really is, for me, that's a big thing, because it's like they say they don't believe in an oral law, but they created their own. And he said, well, it's not an oral law, it's oral tradition. I said, well, it's sort of the same thing. You're letting someone else tell you how it's supposed to be fulfilled. So I'd like to cover that as well as other things that I sent you a copy of some things. So if you could comment on pretty much everything there. And it seems like this might be the last episode for this one, though. It could be. So, but anyway, either way, I'm glad that you're here to cover it. I really appreciate your time and your scholarship, and I'll let you have it.
Okay, always, as we said, always a pleasure to be here. There were a number of questions, that I also saw in the chat where one thing actually, before we hit this thing about, the Karaites, there are 2 things, there are 2 things I think that are important to mention. One is that, people claim, and we mentioned this last week, people claim I don't have to listen to the rabbis, the rabbis are the rabbis, and we don't, people coming out of Christianity, and they'll say, why do I have to listen to them, etc. But the Torah has a precedent, right? The Torah tells me in Parsha Shoftim, chapter 17, right? Chapter 17, verse 8, and onwards, right? In Deuteronomy, it says, if a matter of judgment is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities. Right? The disagreements, what do? Rise up, ascend to the place Hashem, your God, shall choose. Right? You go to the Beis HaMikdash, you go to the temple, you come to the Kohanim, the Levites, the judges who will be in those days. You shall inquire. They will tell you the word of judgment. Right? Who do you go to? Right? Who do you go to? You're going to go to the Kohanim and the Levites in those days. Verse 10, you shall do according to the word that they will tell you. From that place that Hashem will choose, and you'll be careful to do according to everything they will teach you. Right? So verse 10 tells you, you do what the Kohen tell you, no matter what. Right? No matter what they tell you. According to the teaching in verse 11, they're going to teach you according to the judgment. They will teach you, right? They will say to you, shall you do, shall not deviate from their words, that they will tell you right or left. Right? So verse 11 tells you, doesn't matter what they tell you. They tell you, whatever they tell you, you can't veer from it. Can't go to the right, can't go to the left. And now, as the English would say, it gets a little bit dicey here. Verse 12, it says, the man who shall act with willfulness, not listening to the Kohen, who stands there to serve Hashem your God, or to the judge. Kohen or the judge. The man shall die, you shall destroy the evil from among Israel. Verse 13, the entire nation shall listen in fear, they shall not act willfully anymore. Now, if what we say the Torah is true, and the Karaites and everyone else are going to take, whoever it is, they're going to take the Torah literally. The Torah is telling me here, you listen to the Kohanim and the Levites in all generations. Right? Whatever they bring to you, right? Between verdict and verdict, between judgment and judgment, plague and plague, all these things. Whatever they bring to you, you have to go to them. You have to listen to them. It doesn't tell me, well, if I feel like doing it, I'll keep it myself. I'll come up with my own explanation. No, it says you do according to what they say. You don't veer to the left. You don't veer to the right. Right? You do whatever they tell you. And not only that, if you don't, what's the punishment? Right? What's the punishment here? The punishment is that you get the death penalty. There's a death penalty. Now, what someone had said was, okay, you're going to, why are the rabbis talking about Karaites? Why us? Why should we speak about it? So, what we could have done is we could have brought a Karaite here. Or anyone that claims that JC is the Messiah when Rabbi Singer speaks, let him have a debate, right? We'll bring him on to Knock Talk. Let him have a debate. But we have an agenda. Everyone agrees. We're coming from a Torah perspective. We're coming from an Orthodox Jewish perspective, right? That's what we're doing, right? That's what we're doing, right? So the claim here is someone here says, right? Someone here says clear that bring in a Karaite, right? Bring in an expert, right? We're going to bring in an expert over here, right? Let them speak. Now, why would I not do that? Now, this is not my show, obviously, right? This is up to William over here. But, why would I not debate someone who believes Jesus is the Messiah? Why would I not debate, a Muslim or someone who dogs me all the time, who's a secular Quranist, and say, well, we don't teach Noahide, right? We don't do the right thing. We push them away. So let them become Muslim light. Why wouldn't I give this person a platform? You know why? Because the Rambam says clear as day. The Rambam explains that anyone who goes against the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, they're making up a new religion. It's what we call Chidushei Das. They're making up a new religion. If they're making up a new religion, it's false. You can't go against Moshe Rabbeinu, right? There are contradictions in the Quran. There are contradictions, in the New Testament. There are historical inaccuracies, etc. So the question is, let them speak. Give them a platform. Why should we listen to rabbis who only give a gloss over it? So I can speak here till tomorrow. We could do 3 shows, 5 shows, 8 shows, 100 shows. We could delve into it to the depth where it would make people nauseous. We're not going to do that. Why would we do that? We're going to speak about it. We'll understand about it. We'll make the points we need to make, right? But here's the most important thing. The most important thing is, who are you going to go to? Who are you going to go to ask your questions? You're going to go to the Kohanim. You are going to go to the Levites. You are going to go to the judge in your day. Who's the judge in your day? Who in the world is the judge in your day? Sounds to me like that's going to be rabbinic authority. That's the judge in your day. When we explained last week, they're going to explain what the Torah means. Because the Torah doesn't make sense logically, 80% of it, 90% of it, right? But at the same time, as we said, right, the Torah is a law document. If the Torah is a law document, it doesn't give definitions. Fine, but let me ask. We're going to flip the script here. Let me ask the following question. Would a Karaite, it's got a wide audience. Yeah, it's got thousands of people listening. Are they going to bring on rabbis to explain their side of the view? Unless they're totally open-minded till their brains fall on the floor? I don't think so. Right? I don't think that's going to happen. Because, maybe once in a blue moon, they're going to have a separate thing. They'll have a debate. They'll have this. They'll have that. They'll have different things. Maybe. But, I haven't heard anything recently. I haven't heard anything less than the last 30 years. I don't think William's heard too much. I don't think too many people have heard too much from the Karaites. You tell me. So I just saw a thing recently. There are 30,000 Karaites in the world. Okay? Right? Are they going to give us a platform? Are they going to give us, our chance to explain? No, they're not going to do that. 100% they're not going to do that. Because they have their own agenda. We also have an agenda. Okay? We're not going to deny that, or I'm not going to deny that, right? My perspective, people come to me for conversion. I don't deal with Reform and conservative. I don't deal with. If they want a real conversion, right? I'll tell them, this is what I do. If you're interested, fine. If not, okay. But the point is, right? The point over here is, right? If that is true, bring in a true Karaite. So we believe, maybe William wants to do that, and he wants to have a debate, whatever. You want to bring in a missionary, and have a debate with Rabbi Singer. Okay, that's your choice. Would I give these people, a dime, to speak? I wouldn't do it. Why not? Because what's the purpose? We believe they're false. They can't pass it down, certainly to the next generation. I think that's clear, right? And that's going to mark something that has validity, even though you get thousands and millions of Christians, but it's only name only. There are a lot of Bible thumpers. That's also true, right? It's also 100% true. But regardless of all that, why would I give them a pedestal? That's why Orthodox rabbis say, you have a debate. Is it permissible to have a debate, with Reform and conservative leaders, right? And many, if not all of them, have said no. Why not? Because you don't give them a pedestal. You don't give them a pedestal. They're giving off their, they're spewing off their false beliefs and all that. So why do we have to confuse people? You can say, oh, maybe you're wrong. Well, we don't think we're wrong. I don't think there's any doubt. We don't think they're wrong. They can think they're right. That's fine. But here the Torah says clear, you're going to listen to the rabbis. You're going to listen to Kohanim in every generation, right? That's it. That's it. Someone says, why did you find a former Karaite? Federow's not a Karaite. Might be a conservative rabbi. He's not a Karaite. You want to bring on someone, quote unquote, authentic. But again, if something's dead and something doesn't really exist in the world, I don't care if there are 30,000 people. It means, it's still dying, etc. Because we don't hear from them. So if we don't hear from them, why would I give them? Why in the world would I give them a pedestal, right? Why would I give them a pedestal? There's no purpose to give them a pedestal. You can say, oh, it's not fair. You're closed-minded. Okay, I'm not claiming to be open-minded. No one's claiming over here to be open-minded, per se, right? We want information. We want proper information, right? So what would I say on that? I would say on that, we're not going to give someone the time of day. We're not going to give it to them. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? So that, that's one thing. That's one thing. But again, we mentioned at the end of last week that that anybody who's going to say, we don't listen to the rabbis. What do you do with the Masoretic text? With vowels, King James Version, right? All these things, translation. What are you going to have? You need rabbinics. You need the rabbinic authority to tell you what the words mean. Fine. Now, we made a statement, right? We made a statement that that Karaites don't believe in oral law, right? Which is true. We're going to clarify here. But the Karaites here, right? Someone here pointed out, right? They believe entirety of the Hebrew Scripture. Okay. But again, as William had mentioned, if they believe in the entirety of Hebrew Scripture, 80% of it has no definitions. If they have no definitions, where are they coming up with definitions? They're going to say, we don't listen to you. We're not going to listen to the rabbis, right? The Torah says you don't kindle a fire. You're not allowed to kindle a fire on Shabbos, so they're going to sit in the dark. Okay, they're going to sit in the dark. They're going to eat cold food. But, is there anything else about Shabbos that you can't carry? So, what does that mean? You can't cook. What about reheating? There are a lot of questions. So they're going to have to come up with their own oral law. That's what they're going to have to answer. So if they're going to have to answer, so you could say, well, maybe their definitions and maybe what they hold is more authentic than what we hold. Right? So how are we going to judge that? How are we going to judge that? So you could say, well, what about continuity? What happened over here? Why did the rabbis win out? Now, so I'll tell you like this. In Exodus chapter 23, verse 2, what does it tell me? It tells me you go after the majority, meaning the majority for good. So if I have 3 pieces of meat, if I have one of them is not kosher. If I have 3 pieces of meat, I can eat 1, or I can eat 2, And that wouldn't be a problem. Why? Because the majority is kosher. Now, the question, can I eat all three at once? Or, am I allowed to eat, one and then eat the second one and then eat the third one? It's going to be a problem because one of them for sure isn't kosher. We know one isn't kosher. But the point is, I go after the majority. Now, any Karaite out there is going to say, okay, the Torah tells me they're going to have to come up with an explanation. What does it mean to go according to the majority? Now, if the majority many times, as the Talmud says, Yachid v'Rabbi molech achar Rabbi, if there's a difference of opinion between one, let's say one rabbi and many, right? Rabbi means many in the plural. So what do? You go according to the majority. There are instances where, there are certain cases where you are going to go one against the majority. Doesn't apply. And in general, we're going to say you 100% go according to the majority. So what do the Karaites answer for that? You have to go according to the majority. Rabbis are the majority. You're going to say they exert power. They did other things, right? Where someone here is going to bring up in a second. We're going to go through this. But they're the ones who were the authority. If they are the authority, how can you go against the authority? So you're going to say, well, weren't there minorities? Weren't there other groups? So, okay. Right? We mentioned up until 250 years ago, everyone was Orthodox. So someone here points out from Josephus, right, that Josephus said there were really 4 branches. Right? You have the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, right? And some other unnamed branch, whatever it was. Right? So isn't it true there were other groups? Yeah. So you're going to say, wow, you forgot about that? No. I didn't forget about it. What happened to them? Are there any Essenes left in the world today? No. Right? You only have left is what the rabbis tell us. All the other groups disappeared. Right? So up until 250 years ago, there were people more religious, less religious, etc. And there is a paragraph, that we say in the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, the main prayer that we say in every prayer service, what we call the Shemona Esrei. And there's a paragraph there saying that we should get rid of all these sects, that they shouldn't have any power. They shouldn't be able to do anything in the world. So it doesn't mean no one existed, right? The point is, what happened to these people, right? That was really my point, is that what happened to these people? These people don't exist. We don't know where they are. You know why we don't know? I shouldn't say we don't know where they are. They disappeared. Essentially, like the Karaites have disappeared. So it's so instead of saying, okay, I could have spent 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes going through the different groups and saying, okay, yeah, this group, yeah, that group, yeah, the other group. But what's the point of even bringing them up if they don't even exist anymore? You're going to say, wow, that's not being historically accurate. Okay. So someone wants to have a claim and say, we're not going to be historically accurate. What have they done in the world? They've disappeared. 100% if they've disappeared. If they've disappeared, well, I'm going to give them we can mention them in a historical passing, right? We can mention the fact, okay, they did exist. We're not going to say they didn't, and they weren't other sects, right? We're not going to say, they weren't here, etc. But they're gone. They've disappeared, right? Just like the Byzantines, they've disappeared. The Ottomans, they disappeared. The Romans, the Greeks, they disappeared. Okay. Some of them played a very major role in Jewish history. So when discussing Hanukkah, you discuss the Greeks. Discuss the destruction of the temple, when we discuss the Babylonians. They made a significant impact. A significant impact. Now, people say, come on, there's Torah scholarship, right, which someone here is going to bring out, we'll bring in a second. There's all this scholarship about the Essenes and about this and about that. When I took Near Eastern philosophy, right, Jewish philosophy or whatever, what went on during that time, right, in that early time. Okay, right? So it's important to know about Jewish history. Okay, it's important. We're not going to say not. But for the purpose of what we're doing, for the purpose of giving over this information, yeah, we could delve into that. We're not afraid to tell what the history is. I mean, we tell the good with the bad. You go through Tanakh, you tell the good with the bad. But why would I even waste time in general? Why would I waste time on this? You want to read just Josephus, okay? Right? Gives a lot of interesting information. right? Even though he was sort of a traitor and, went over to the other side. So you gotta be able to read through what he says, in general. But, many rabbinic authorities hold what he said is accurate, right? It's definitely accurate in many ways. But okay, you want to read that? You want to read about Jewish history and all that? That's fine. No one's going to disagree with that. But again, for the purpose of this, we're saying that, okay, these groups existed. We're not going to say they didn't, right? So why do we say that, right? Why do we mention up to 250 years ago there was only Judaism? Because these other sects disappeared. They're not around. We don't have any, very little remembrance of them whatsoever, right? So why would we bother mentioning them? We could have, right? You could have a claim and say you should have mentioned it. Okay, so I should have mentioned it. Should I mention every little thing that now disappears, right? Should we mention all that? Do we mention minority opinions necessarily in the Talmud if they have no ramification for what Jewish law is going to say in the end? We mention them. We bring in all kinds of opinions, right? That is definitely true. But if it has no ramifications when it comes to Jewish law, that we're not going to say they're not mentioned. There could be other opinions not mentioned. But why are they not mentioned? Because they're insignificant. They might be mentioned just to tell you a general thing, what different rabbis held and whatever, even if we don't hold according to them, in Jewish law. Point is, what if they're not mentioned? There could be plenty of opinions and different things that aren't mentioned. You know why they're not mentioned? Because they're not relevant. They have no relevance. If they have no relevance, why are we going to mention them? So we're going to stick to the point where, up until 250 years ago, what other groups existed? You're going to say there were the Essenes, there were the Pharisees, there were the Sadducees, blah, 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 right? 250 years ago, did they exist? Where were they? Where in the world were they? Right? So someone here points out that that in the late 1700s, Karaite Judaism was alive and well. Why? Right? Because the whole statement here. Right? Let's bring this up here. So the statement was, right, Sadducees don't believe in oral law. Right? They don't believe in oral law. Right? Sadducees are different than Karaites. Why? Because they only believe in the first 5 books. Right? So we're going to say, okay, they didn't believe in an afterlife. The Karaites differ. Okay, so, you want to be picky unit and say, okay, there are differences. There are differences between what the Sadducees held, what the Karaites held. Okay, so you want to say I didn't cover it properly? Could be, right? Could very well be. But there's a secular historian from Princeton University, right, that claims that what made Jews accuse other Jews of heresy, right? Now, in order to be a heretic, the Rambam in the Laws of Repentance has a number of criteria about not believing that the Torah is from heaven, or you believe all the verses came from heaven except one. That makes you a heretic. Not believing in the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That would make you a heretic. Not believing in the prophets would make you a heretic. It's got a whole laundry list of people who are considered heretics, right? Now, so the person makes the claim and says, okay, what made Jews accuse Jews of heresy? In some circumstances, not others. Well, what is someone who's a heretic, right? Is that a specific definition? The Rambam, again, has a whole list of who's considered a heretic, right? So someone here is going to say, well, in some circumstances, it depends. It depends what it is, right? What makes them a heretic? He made a clear-cut statement of all these different people. There is a question today. So what about what we call a tinok shenishba? Someone who, was captured by the non-Jews, and someone we're talking about that never had a Jewish education. They never learned. They don't know the Aleph base, right? They don't know anything, which is most of Jews today. 90% of world Jewry today. So what about them? They're going to say, I don't believe in the Bible. I don't believe in, prophecy and Moses. I don't believe in any of this. It's all made up. It's all, whatever. What about them? Are they heretics? Well, seemingly according to the Rambam, they'd be heretics, but they don't know anything, right? So the question is the punishment the same for someone who didn't grow up with a proper education and they reject Torah, or someone who knows better, someone who grew up with it and rejects it, right? So take the Karaites, right? We'll take the Karaites or any other group. So if they learn Torah and they understand what Torah is, you can't say they don't know. They know what the laws of Shabbos are, right? They've heard of Shabbos. They've heard of keeping kosher. They've heard of, all kinds of other things that the Torah says. So we take them out of this category. We're not going to say they're a Tino Chinish, but they don't know any better. Oh, but what's the problem? The problem is they don't keep what the Torah says. They take literal interpretation. So if they take literal interpretation, they go against the rabbis. According to us, they're not keeping what the Torah says. They're keeping whatever they think it says. But they're not keeping what we think. So if they're not keeping what we think, but they understand what Torah is, they didn't grow up, as a potato farmer in Idaho. No offense, anyone's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho, right? Point is, they didn't grow up not knowing anything, not being quote unquote Jewishly educated, right? They know something. They certainly know something. So even if they know something and they reject Torah, isn't that worse? That's worse, right? So the Rambam is saying, people like that who reject, they're going to have the status of a heretic. But somebody doesn't know, isn't he a heretic also? He's also a heretic, right? The question is, what's the responsibility? What's the liability? What are they going to be obligated in? What level? Now, if they desecrate Shabbos in public, and if there was a temple today and there was a Sanhedrin and there were witnesses and they warned them, what's the punishment? Death penalty, they get spiritually cut off. That's the punishment. Now, what about a secular Jew? Doesn't know nothing from nothing. Doesn't know anything. So if he doesn't know anything, he can't give the death penalty today anyway. We don't have a temple and all that, right? We don't have a Sanhedrin. We don't have a Jewish Supreme Court. So you can't do that. That's true, right? That would be true. But it's talking about the severity, the prohibition. But you tell me he doesn't know anything. He's never been educated. So what? What do I care? What do I care he hasn't been educated? Didn't he do something egregious? What about someone who intermarries? Right? I don't want to digress here. Someone who intermarries, you ask any Jew that belongs to a synagogue and say, according to the Bible, the Old Testament, right? Tell me yes or no. We'll make it very easy. No buts. Yes or no. Is a Jew allowed to marry a non-Jew? So it's either yes or no. They'll say no, but no. There's no but over here. You're not allowed to, right? So what's the status of someone who does that? Everyone knows it's forbidden. If everyone knows it's forbidden, then the status is pretty severe. Many rabbinical authorities hold they lose their status of a Jew unless they repent, unless, let's say, the person converts properly, or they get divorced, or whatever, right? Whatever the case is going to be. But the punishment is going to be severe if they're going to have the status of a non-Jew in many ways, right? You can't answer amen to their blessing. You can't call them up to the Torah. You know why you can't call them up to the Torah? What's the blessing over the Torah? The blessing over the Torah is Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim, that God shows us from amongst the people. You marry a non-Jew. How can you make that blessing? It's a blessing in vain. Right? If they touch your wine, if they touch your wine, a Jew's wine that wasn't cooked or pasteurized, let's say semi-dry wine or dry wine, right? That's not cooked or pasteurized, right? That's called yain nesech, right? So they're not allowed to touch it. If they touch it, you got to spill out the wine. Why? So I'm going to call it spiritual cooties, right? Whatever the rabbis, wanted to make sure we don't have any contact with non-Jews, we don't drink with them, etc. We don't want to lead to intermarriage. So based on that, we know there are certain things that are out, they're totally forbidden. That the Torah says totally forbidden, right? Now, that being the case, you want to tell me a secular Jew is going to say, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to do it anyway. The Bible's too old and it got to change with the times and all that. Fine, right? But what are they doing? They're going against exactly what the Torah says. They know, they don't know. There are certain things that are pretty egregious, right? So what's the claim over here? So the claim is, what made Jews accuse Jews of heresy in some circumstances, but not in others? So there's criteria, right? You're throwing out a bomb question here, right? A bomb question, but it's based on not having proper understanding of what's going on, right? In other words, there are certain things that Jews are going to accuse other Jews of being heretical. You're right. There is certain criteria. You have to evaluate in the circumstances what the criteria is. Does it apply? Does it not apply? Right? For example, the Torah says, we'll mention Shabbos again, Torah says you're not allowed to kindle a fire. So now, what about electricity? What about gas? What about, let's say an electric flame? Is that the same thing as kindling a fire? So you can say, oh, they're changing the Torah. The rabbis are changing the Torah. So did the Torah tell me a definition of what fire is? No. Torah didn't tell me. So Karaites and others who believe this, they're going to sit in the dark. They're going to eat cold food. They're not going to kindle a fire at all. Okay? That's what they're going to do. So you have to understand, is a microwave, is that considered like fire? Is electricity, is gas, all these things. So it has to be evaluated. There are circumstances, maybe it does apply, maybe it doesn't apply. Electricity, the consensus is it's forbidden on Shabbos. Question is why? What category does it come under? That's a whole discussion. That's not not the purpose for now. Right? But the idea is, it is going to change according to circumstances. In some cases, someone will be considered a heretic. In other cases, someone may not be considered a heretic. That's not being fickle. That's being based on criteria, on circumstances of what's going on. That's not, that's just saying, oh, they just make it up as they go. It depends. I'll give an example. Give one example. Because I don't necessarily harp on this point, but I'll give one example. Someone could ask a rabbi, two people could ask a rabbi the same question. They could ask the exact same question, but they get different answers. Why do they get different answers? Right? Isn't there one universal Torah? There is one universal Torah. But for certain things, one may apply to one person in one way. It may apply to someone in a different way. It depends where they're holding, right? It depends what the subject is. Depends what they're holding. There are many things. You can't go left or right. The halacha is what it is. It's not going to change, right? But there might be certain things where a person, for one person, they'll say, okay, for you, this isn't for you. For someone else, maybe it will be. But it depends on circumstances. You can't just throw up a statement, and say, well, it depends. People are going to say it depends on circumstances, right? In some cases this, some cases that. Yeah, it depends. It depends on what's going on. I'll give one other example. The Talmud goes through a whole discussion. You're not allowed to save a Jew. You're not allowed to save a non-Jew on Shabbos if a non-Jew is drowning, right? So the Messianics and everyone throws that out there. They say, we go against non-Jews and all that. But the whole point of that passage, 3/4 of the page of that passage in the Talmud is talking about how you're allowed to save a Jew. How in the world are you allowed to save a Jew? It's only because he's going to keep Shabbos. And if he's not going to keep Shabbos, technically maybe we shouldn't save him. But then it throws in the question at the end, so a non-Jew wouldn't apply over here. A non-Jew you wouldn't save. You know why? Because he's not going to keep Shabbos. He can't keep Shabbos. So why would I save him? Right? Why would I save him? But what does it come out? Practically speaking, you're going to save a Jew, you're going to save a non-Jew for a number of reasons. Right? So you're going to say, well, doesn't that apply in all circumstances? No, it doesn't. In general, the rabbis are telling you this is what the law is. It's complicated. It's complicated because who says I'm allowed to save a Jew? Right? Who says I'm allowed to desecrate Shabbos for a Jew who's not going to keep Shabbos? Then you're going to say, well, how do I know he's going to keep Shabbos? Let's say you say to a Jew, you know who the person is. We'll make it very easy. You know who the person is. He's a secular Jew, doesn't care about Torah. You can say, maybe he'll change, maybe that'd be a reason to save him, right? But in general, there's a statement. And the statement is, you don't save him if he's not going to keep Shabbos. So then you throw in the case about a non-Jew. Okay, a non-Jew doesn't have laws of Shabbos. So you're going to say, well, how can you say that? And that's discrimination, that's this, that's that. But we're analyzing according to this. According to this, it depends on the circumstances. This doesn't apply today for a number of reasons. For a number of reasons, it doesn't apply. You see a Jew or non-Jew drowning on Shabbos, you do what you can to save him, right? That's the practical halacha today. That's what you do. But if you're going to analyze what the rabbis say and what the law is, you got to analyze according to what's going on, according to the circumstances, according to what I'll give another example. When it comes to determining somebody's death, do we go after brain death or the fact that the heart stops beating. Major difference of opinion. Major difference of opinion, right? And that could be the difference between life and death over here. Now, someone could look at this, someone who's a world-class expert in these type of things, right? So they're going to call it the way they see it, but it's going to depend on circumstances. So again, you can't throw out a statement and say, well, how can you say you're going to accuse them in certain circumstances, not others, right? That shows the total lack of knowledge of how oral law works, right? That jumps out to me like a sore thumb. That's going to show they don't know what they're talking about because they don't know Talmudic logic. They don't know how the rabbinic authorities look at things. Earlier commentators, later commentaries, the sizes of Jewish law today, they have no understanding of what that is. Because if they would, they wouldn't make such a statement. They wouldn't make such a statement. They could ask, okay, does this apply in this case? Does this apply in another case? Yes or no? But obviously, this person, based in academia, right? We'll take knock off the academics over here. Not all of them, right? But when you make a loaded statement, right? I would say logically, isn't it? You should have a world-class understanding, of what you're saying over here. Meaning that if you're going to make a statement and say, well, there are Jews that accuse Jews of heresy in some circumstances and not others. Okay. Now, if that's true, they bring up an example. We're going to bring up this example in a second, right? But if that's true, and you've gone through the enormous amount of learning, of going to Talmud and the commentators, in all this. So if you're going to tell me that and you've gone all through it, okay. But when you make a general statement, and that general statement is going to say, wow, sometimes you do this, sometimes you do that. You're right. But why is it done in certain circumstances and not in others? Because it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. It doesn't depend on one thing. So you cannot say, even though this person did, you can't make a general statement and say, well, it applies like this and it doesn't apply like that. You have to know what the circumstances are. You have to know what the case is, right? You can't overgeneralize here. But let's go a little bit further. Person says that the sources I studied show me rabbinic authority, which historians have considered the great shaper of medieval Jewish communal life, right? Obviously, it's going to be an attack against the rabbis here. Does not adequately explain coherence of medieval Jewish communities, right? There are other Jewish communities. So they write in the year 1029, there was a throng of rabbis who attempted to have the Karaites excommunicated. Right? They wanted to stop them on the pilgrimage festival of the Mount of Olives. Now, why did it fail? Why did it fail? Because they're claiming it failed because there were certain great rabbis who disagreed, who opposed it, who totally opposed it. Now, excommunication is a pretty serious thing. Excommunicating individuals means could marry into their families. You shouldn't count them, in a minyan, 10 men, to pray. There were many things that people did that could have led them to be excommunicated. Now, that being the case today, today doesn't really have the same power. It definitely doesn't have the same power as it did, as it once did. Even though today, let's say a man will not give his wife a bill of divorce. So they try and enact certain things where they'll force him, or at least you can't really force him, but, make it worth his while to do it, try and convince him to do it, to not leave this woman as an aguna, as a chained woman, so to speak, who can't remarry. Point is that, so you can excommunicate him, etc. Doesn't have the same power over here, but the point is they wanted to have them excommunicated. Why? Why they want to have them excommunicated? Because any of these sects have a negative influence on Torah. We don't want them as part of the Jewish people, right? We want to push them aside because they're causing tremendous damage. Tremendous damage, right? Now, the claim is that it failed, right? It failed because there were certain rabbis saying, no, you can't do it for different reasons, right? Whatever it was. But what are we saying over here? We're saying that what they did was so bad and was so horrendous that you want them not to have any connection to the Jewish people whatsoever. Oh, people will say, they'll make against Orthodox Jews, say, wow, you have these laws of modesty, and other things. And come on, if a guy walks on a beach, he goes to a mixed beach, and and he sees women, in bathing suits or whatever, and he gets excited, we're going to keep this clean, right? Then there's a problem with him. Well, doesn't the Torah say, we don't, you don't put a stumbling block in front of somebody, especially yourself. You can say, well, I should be in control. You should be in control. Don't we have an evil inclination? We have a very strong evil inclination. That's probably the strongest inclination a person has, that God gave to a person. So we don't put ourselves in situations that we know are going to be bad. We don't tempt the evil inclination. What's the greatest example to give? Adam and Eve. What did Adam decide? Why did they eat from the tree of knowledge? Adam made a calculation. His calculation was, if I take this evil inclination and I put it inside my body, and every time I go against the evil inclination, every time I do the right thing, I perform a mitzvah, then exponentially, what do? I elevate the body, I elevate the soul. If I go against what I do, what God wants, right? I go against it. I go against what the Torah says. So if I go against what the Torah says, then what's going to happen? I'm going to debase the body and I'm going to debase the soul. Right? Now, what's the point? What's the point over here? God, in this case, calls Adam a heretic. Now, as the rabbis tell us, Adam was the greatest of God's creation. The absolute greatest of God's creation. Pretty much a pure soul, right? A pure soul in a body. You can understand who Adam was. But God calls him a heretic. Circumstances. Why does God call him a heretic? Why does he call him a heretic over here? Does it fit the criteria of the Rambam? Maybe not. But why does God call him a heretic? Talmud tells me. Because what did God tell him? God told him, I do not want you to eat from the tree of knowledge. Whatever you do, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Okay. So Adam thought, I know better. I'm going to reinvent the wheel. That's what I'm going to do. So God says, I agree with you. I agree that if you go against your evil inclination, and you do mitzvahs, you control your thoughts, all these things, you are going to sanctify the body exponentially. 100% true. And God says, I would also agree that if you don't do that and you sin, it debases the body and debases the soul, and it makes it much harder to fight against. I also agree. God says there's only one problem. One major problem. What's the major problem? I didn't create the world for that, God says. I didn't create the world for that. So if I didn't create the world for that, I told you not to do this. So, okay, God says I have to go to plan B. So God understands, okay, man can make the wrong choice. But God says, I didn't want you to reinvent the wheel. I might agree with what you said, in theory, but that's not what I wanted you to do. So, you can't, even if we think, well, maybe this is better, I'm going to do this better, much better, and this and that, but that's not what God wants. And if that's not what he wants, then I'm not allowed to do it. Doesn't matter what my inclination is. There are certain things, maybe for certain times, that, something had to be done. Maybe, the rabbis say, we made this decree for this time because certain things were happening, etc. But it's going to be made for all generations. No, there are a lot of factors over here. So now, what's the next claim? The Cairo Geniza documents made by Rabbi Solomon Schechter. Solomon Schechter, one of the main founders of the conservative movement, right, was, actually, a certain point was actually Orthodox. And he brings out here that there's a document, a marriage document between a notable Karaite and a rabbinic family. In other words, they say that in 1082, daughter of a Karaite notable married this David Ben Daniel, whoever this person was, right? A rabbinic aspirant to the office of Reis Al Yehud, and son of a Gaon of the Jerusalem Missionary, made stipulations contained protecting the religious observance of both husband and wife. Okay, now what's the point here? What's the point? So this person brings up in the name of Solomon Schechter, right? Of Solomon Schechter over here. There was a marriage between a Karaite and a rabbi, and a rabbinic aspirant, let's say, right? There was this marriage in the year 1082, right? So I guess at the time of Rashi, right? After the time of the Gonim, the canonization of the Talmud, right? After that time. Okay. So what does that show? What does that show over here? It shows that one rabbi, so to speak, or let's just say an observant Jew married a Karaite. Now, how can it be an observant Jew is going to marry a Karaite? What about the laws of divorce? What about other things? Right? It's going to be, quote unquote, a mixed marriage, in certain ways. But okay, so that's true. Let's say that's true. Let's say I would agree this happened. We'll give credibility here to what it is. Okay, so what? So one person married a Karaite. See, the Mishnah says there were many disagreements. Mishnah Yevamah says that there were many disagreements between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. Many, many disagreements. But that didn't stop the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel to marry each other, right? To have their children marry each other. Now, they had a lot of disagreements, many, many disagreements. So how could they marry into each other if they held, certain things in marriage? One held was permissible, one held it was forbidden. They had major disagreements. So what's the answer? Because they're holding within the same parameters. They're holding within the same system. If they're holding within the same, okay, they have disagreements. They have to, figure out which custom they're going to go according to. That's true. That is true. But if you're holding according to totally different systems, that's going to be a problem, right? So yeah, we're not saying the Karaites didn't exist, right? We made a statement. Let's go back to the beginning, right? We made a statement that up until 250 years ago, basically everybody was Orthodox, right? Does that mean the Karaites don't exist? No. It doesn't mean they didn't exist. They did exist. You want to bring me a proof that there were Karaites that married maybe rabbinic scholars or married maybe Orthodox Jews. You want to convince me and everyone else to say, well, that was the norm? I don't believe that was the norm. You want to tell me there was tremendous intermarriage between Karaites and Orthodox Jews who kept rabbinic Judaism? That you have to bring me proof for. That you'd have to bring proof for, and show that. You want to tell me that someone married, in this case, someone married a Karaite? Okay, so their quote is, it's sufficient to say, that Karaite Judaism is alive and well. It's also extremely misleading. Even if you want to tell me, throughout the millennium there were Karaites, okay? Even if that's true, we're not, I'm not denying that, right? There were other groups as we saw before, right? You had the Sadducees, you had the Pharisees, you had the Essenes, okay, right? That may all be true. That may all 100% be true. Where are they today? Where are they? They're nowhere. They're nowhere in the world today. 30,000. I just saw a quote. There are 30,000 of them. Probably mostly here in Israel. You don't hear anything from them. Zero. So even if you want to tell me 1,000 years ago, an Orthodox Jew married a Karaite, okay. You want to tell me tens of thousands married Karaites? I find that hard to believe. And even if they did, what are they practicing? Are they practicing? That'd be a major difference of opinion, right, between husband and wife. Are they going to practice rabbinic Judaism, or are they going to practice, Karaitism? Are they going to be Karaites? What are they going to do over here? So that doesn't show me. That only shows me that there's one example, right? There's one example. One intermarried, right? I shouldn't say intermarried. One married a Karaite. Okay, they married a Karaite. That shows me that Karaites are alive and well. Doesn't show me that, right? Again, you're talking about in the year, the end of the 11th century, right? That's what you're telling me, or the end of the 10th century. That's what you're telling me over here. Okay, you want to tell me throughout history there was marriage between Karaites and Orthodox Jews? I don't think so. Right? Definitely don't think so. So, but, even if you want to tell me all this, where are the Karaites today? That's the point. Right? So 250 years ago, Karaite Judaism was alive and well. I don't know. What was alive and well mean? People will say there are tens of millions of Christians. They're alive and well, but I think it's a shell. I think it's definitely a shell because many of them are really observant. How many can then pass it down and all that? So, alive and well is a relative term. Alive and well for me would to tell me that, someone will say, well, look at Reformed Jews. Look how many Reformed Jews are in the world. Look how many conservative Jews are in the world. Tens of thousands. They are the majority, right? Maybe the majority is secular Jews. Don't affiliate with the synagogue. But you tell me, tens of thousands. There are tens of thousands of Reformed Jews. Okay? Are they alive and well? I don't think they're alive and well. All their synagogues are dying, right? Conservative synagogues, they're all dying all over. All over, they're dying. And if they haven't died yet, it's just only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. So does that mean, and they've only been around for, less than 200 years. So does that mean they're alive and well? If they're basically, if they're basically on life support, doesn't mean that. It just means they have numbers, but a lot of their numbers, certainly in the Reform movement, are non-Jews. So how can you tell me that's alive and well? Right? So that's not a proof over here. But again, what we're going to do over here is we're going to discuss issues. And we're going to get to the heart of issues. So again, for the next 2, 3, 5 weeks, we could go through soup to nuts, every last thing the Karaites believe, every last thing, that the Essenes believed, where they differed, where they didn't differ. I think the ratings, no offense, I think the rating's going to tank. Why the rating's going to tank over here? Because nobody cares. Nobody cares what they agreed with, what they disagreed with. We're giving an overview. You want to read books on it. They're very good historical books. You can read with Barrow Wine. You should be well. He wrote all about it. Other people wrote about it. Very good. You can go through all the details. The purpose of what we do is not go into every, nook and cranny of every aspect. We could have done 25 shows, about, crazy statements in the Talmud against non-Jews. We could have hit every last statement, analyzed it, differences of opinion, what it means, what it doesn't mean. We condensed it into 6. I think that was pretty good, right? We condensed it into 6. So you want to take me to task and say, well, you said, 250 years ago, everyone was Orthodox. So from the time, so let's say like this. So from the time of Rashi, in the Rambam, in the Ramban, and then you go further down. Where are the thousands of Karaites? They discuss it in rabbinic literature. What they held, what they didn't hold, in different things. But okay, so in the last 300 years, in the last 250, 300 years, where are they today? So basically we said they don't exist. They don't exist. I don't care if they're 30,000. They haven't done, what have they done? You're going to say they keep to their own communities. They keep their own traditions. Okay. But the bottom line is that rabbinic Judaism is where it at. I always tell people that if you want to pass Judaism down to the next generation, either you look like somebody like me or you disappear, right? There's really nothing in between, right? There's definitely nothing in between over here. So if that's true, then what are we going to do over here? How can you say, Karaite Judaism was alive and well? They existed. We're not saying they didn't exist, right? I didn't mention the Essenes and anyone else because they're not relevant today. They're totally not relevant today. And I would say even with the numbers of Reform and conservative Jews, they're also not relevant. And I'm not saying they're not Jews, right? Unless their mother's not Jewish. But they're also not relevant today. I'll give one example. There's a whole controversy, or some people may say a controversy, right? There's a controversy about, they have a Reform and conservative Jews have a certain place to pray at the Western Wall, to have men and women sit together, women wear tefillin, women read Torah, like all these things, right? So a certain place by the Western Wall where they're allowed to pray. Now, I would ask the $1.5 million question. If you would ask a Reform or conservative Jew today, you would ask them, what are the top 10 things? The top 10 things that are, that are destroying, your movement today. That, people are, don't want to hold by it or are becoming more unaffiliated, different things. What are the top 10 things? I can guarantee you probably number 297 is probably about this thing about what goes on the Western Wall, right? With, what they call the women of the wall. Because, and not only that, most of them don't even know that exists. Most of them haven't even been to Israel, right? So, some of them are going to make a lot of noise. A few of them are going to make a lot of noise, and we have to be equal. You got to treat us like equals, in all this. And they're going to make all kinds of noise. Beautiful. Beautiful. But their congregants don't know anything about this. They don't know anything about it, right? So, why are we going to take what they say, seriously? They haven't, what have they brought to the world over here? I'm not, again, I'm not saying they're not Jews, if their mother's Jewish, but you have rapid assimilation, you have rapid intermarriage, and they're basically disappearing off the face of the map, spiritually. In all these synagogues, they're all eventually going to die eventually, right? Just a matter of when. So to me, they might quote unquote be the majority, for now, but the bottom line is they're going to disappear. So someone can make that claim and say, see, they're alive and well. Well, according to a study that was done in the early 1990s, not only are they not alive and well, they're pretty much dead, because most of their congregants don't hold the basic things in Judaism. Keeping Shabbos, keeping kosher. They have their own quote-unquote interpretations, of what the Torah says and what they should keep, what they shouldn't keep. So you can say, wow, they're alive and well, look at their numbers. Yeah, if their numbers are, they're all, most of them are assimilated and intermarried, so numbers are skewed, totally skewed. So what do I care? What do I care what their numbers show? Numbers don't show anything, right? They're just going to disappear anyway, spiritually, which they are. So the same thing, I would say, you want to bring me one proof that says that, that you have a proof, let's say that a Karaite married a rabbinic scholar. Okay. That shows it's alive and well. You tell me there are 50, there are 100, there are thousands, that did that, and that's significant. So I would ask the question, okay, very good. Even if that's true, let's say there were tens of thousands. Even if there were tens of thousands, what happened to them? What happened to their families? So I would venture to guess, and again, this would be a guess over here, but I would venture to guess if a Karaite married a rabbinic Jew, and they held, if they held by rabbinic Judaism, then family-wise, they should have survived, spiritually speaking. If they held by Karaitism, most likely they're not going to survive. They're not going to survive spiritually. It's just not going to happen, because we see what the end result is. Right, we see that the rabbis were so vehement against them because of the damage it caused. But as William said, we'll see how far this goes. If we're going to do another show or not, right? But the bottom line is they have to have their own interpretation. They have to have their own oral law.
Yep.
They have to have their own understanding. So my question would be, what makes their understanding better than ours? It doesn't make it any better than ours, but we have precedent. You'll say they also have precedent, but where are the numbers? Where are the numbers today? Rabbinic Judaism is the only thing that survived. It's the only thing. Reform, dying. Conservative, dying. Right? Progressive, whatever you want to call it, dying. Modern Orthodox, they're also struggling tremendously. They also don't have the numbers they once had. Because they're not going according to what the Torah says in other ways, which, whatever, we're not going to hit that now. Right? So if you go against, bottom line, you go against the rabbis, you're going to disappear. That's the bottom line. So you want to tell me, well, it's alive and well. Well, so it's alive and well. Very good. They're all dying, and they're all spiritually wiping themselves off the face of the map. I don't care, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. That might be a significant number to some, but if you're in the Orthodox world, quote unquote, where are they? What are they doing? When's the last time you heard of a great Karaite convention? And you heard in the news a great Karaite rabbi passed away, or whatever the case is. You don't hear anything. You don't hear anything about them. You're going to say, well, they want to be out of the limelight. They want to be, hush hush. They don't want to grab the, they don't want to grab the headlines and all that. You ever hear, You ever hear of a Karaite rabbi, did something so egregious he went to jail? Different things, maybe. Maybe you'll hear about other rabbis, other ultra-Orthodox rabbis committed fraud, did other things, might have gone to jail, different things. That makes the news. That 100% makes the news. Even sometimes you hear a former rabbi, conservative rabbi did something that may make the news. You ever hear of a Karaite rabbi that did something that made the news? I'd like to see. Anyone can send it to me. You can send it to William, send it to me. I'd be more than happy to see throughout the last 20, 30, 50 years that someone made, a huge splash in the news, that they've done something. So that would tell me, for better or for worse, yeah, it's not alive and well, right? And that, and that's the point. So I hope I answered all these questions.
After the show is over, the video will be marked private, and then tomorrow morning I'll edit it and I'll replay the edited version where all the sound is balanced out nicely and everything. And then we'll replay it again at noon tomorrow to kind of cater to a different crowd, give them a chance to join the live chat as well.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. That sounds good. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful week and a wonderful evening. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like button. And then if you want access to the extra things like the special videos and things that's not public, you guys hit the join button. Join button will give you the access to the original videos and the original chat, as well as any special content that I put out there. So you guys have a wonderful evening. And Rabbi, once again, we'll see you on the other side. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful night. Take care, everybody. Peace.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד.